everybody to Robert Rendell Building and tonight's OREF presentation. I was just musing before the presentation there's optimal weather for OREF presentations, getting a crowd. If the weather's too bad, everybody's scared to come out and they don't turn up. And if the weather's too nice, then everybody's cutting the grass. There's a sort of tricky balance in the middle. But thanks to everybody for coming along tonight. Time a little bit of housekeeping first, just the obvious things. If anybody's new to the building, the toilets are out, well, just on the way in, on the left, on the way in, outside there. There's no planned fire alarms. The fire exit is very obviously just behind you. So, a quick introduction to our speaker today. So, Professor Susan Krumdiek, who's she'll say more about herself and her background, but works with us here at ICIT Harriet Wharton Stromness. And she's here to talk about her work in Orkney and transition engineering and her transition labs. And the way I characterise this work, and Susan may agree or contradict me when she gets up, is that there are a lot of things we're doing well around renewable energy, and we should, in the drive to net zero, and pat ourselves on the back in terms of electricity production. It's really been transformational what's happened in the UK and the move away from oil and gas. But we are moving on to the kind of hard bits now, and there are some things we kind of know what to do, but we seem to struggle to make the jump. We kind of know where we want to get to, but making that transition is really difficult. Appears to be. There are other things we're actually not sure what to do or what the solution is. And Susan would characterise these as wicked problems. And this is, frankly, the territory that we're moving into now with net zero, having kind of picked the low-hanging fruit. And it's about how we make these next steps. So that's quite enough for me. So if I could just invite speaker Susan Krumdiek to take the floor and guide you through a presentation.
Thanks Sandy.
Much.
All right, so I tell you about myself then. So I'm originally from Colorado in the United States and moved in 2000 to New Zealand to take up an academic post there. I'm a mechanical engineer and did my master's and undergrad and PhD in mechanical engineering. I invented a way to make thin film ceramic materials on complex shapes, and so spent a lot of my research time doing that. But my true love is energy systems engineering, and that means all the way from the light, that's the actual useful bit of using energy, to somewhere upstream there was a fish that didn't get its life the way that it wanted to because there's a power plant on that river. So all the way from all the energy conversions and transmissions and all of the impacts and trade-offs that we make in that system. And a lot of my interest is in the anthropology and the culture of energy, because it isn't just the technology. And so I put together my 20 years worth of work and just realized that we have an approach that works. And so we called it transition engineering because it's the work of changing what has to be changed. And so I wrote this book on transition engineering, and it is a textbook by CRC Taylor and Francis, and apparently doing quite well, and I'm going to write the second edition quite soon. And the president of Harriet Watt University found the book right after it came out and invited me to come to Scotland to set up the Island Centre for Net Zero and to do this. So the System Transition Engineering program at Harriet Watt is now coming out of what we're learning from Orkney. So what we learned in New Zealand, I took to Scotland, and what we're learning in Orkney, we're going to bounce back through Edinburgh to change the world. So systems transition engineering processes, what would that mean? We need, okay, well, there we go. We need something new, and that is a way to get over our future blindness. Do we have future blindness? We kind of do. We're really good at looking at history. We have whole history departments at universities. We've got people digging around into history all the time here. So history, no problem. We're good at that. What about future? Where's our Department of Future? Where's our ministry of future? Where is that? Where, as obvious as the past is to us, the future is. And I will propose that anthropologically, there is a lot of risk in thinking about the future too much. And anthropologically, if you have a traditional and pretty much sustainable society, then you know what the future is already. It's you. It's what you're doing. Next year, we will have the ceremony of the equinox on the same day, and we'll do the same dances, and we'll eat the same foods, and we will keep doing what works. And that has been the formula for survival for 100,000 years. Well, then Mr. James Watt came along, and mechanics and being able to convert heat into work. So you're not tied to a wind turbine anymore or a water turbine. You can take energy with you. You don't have to be on the river or out in the wind. You can take energy with you. And you can go places with it. So we're going to talk tonight about that world where now you have this rather unlimited power and what happens when you drive change that quickly. And it might be that this is the driver for our next evolution in our capabilities as humans, which is to actually, in fact, look forward. So that's what Postcards from the Future is about. So we're going to get to Postcards from the Future through a common sense argument for the idea of transition. And so we're going to start where everybody should be and work forward. And then we're going to take that argument and make the case for transition engineering. And then I'm going to show you what it's like to do this work of looking forward and see where it takes us. So common sense, what is common sense? Common sense is what we all agree makes sense. That's why it's common sense. But common sense to you depends on how you see the world. Like I was just talking about, there's traditional ways to see the world, which have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. And that traditional framing is that what's going on in the world and what's going to happen in the future, we're doing our best to keep what we're doing being what's going to be in the future. But there's always the fates, the gods, the Norns, the stars, there's always something that could knock us off course. They're really going to decide what's going on. And in order to survive, we need to follow our traditions, placate the gods, do what the gods want, read the stars, and hope for the best, right? Hope for rewards in the afterlife. Then we got a modern framing, what we would call modernity. And modernity says, well, there's actually inviolate laws of nature, not whims of gods. Right? So there's things that are repeatable. If you do the same experiment, it'll repeat. And those laws of nature determine what's going on. And we can understand things by carefully observing patterns. We can conquer nature through science and engineering, and we can gain wealth now and do whatever we want to do now. Don't worry about the afterlife, right? So Alexander von Humboldt is sort of given the title father of scientific thought, father of modernity, because this framing of being able to know the world by carefully observing, that's what we now call scientific method. Well, I believe that for the last 100,000 years, people were probably more observant than we are, but you still had this way of framing what was going on as being deistic. So now, using careful observation of patterns, cycles, and interactions, we can analyze and understand complex dynamic systems. So dynamic systems means, not that static. Dynamic as if it was flying across the room, right? So things that are in motion, things that are happening. And remember, and this is important right now because this idea of science became very normal. It became the way we think about things. And now it's on protest signs. How did that happen? What is going on? Well, let's just remember that science is, it's not an authority. It isn't a political side. it is just a repeatable way of knowing the world. So if we could pull back from science being a political thing, that would probably be best. All right, so we're going to now do this careful observation thing, and we're going to put careful observation of the way things change, so that's dynamics, onto industry, engineering, and social system transition. So when things change, what is going on? Because that's what we're going to have to get a handle on. The cards that I've laid out there, that's from a published paper from some work that myself and a group of thinkers did, just saying, let's do this careful observation, use the Humboldtian view, and see if we can see a pattern. So here's the pattern. Definitely inventions happen. And those seem to not be able to happen by government edict. You invent something, right? Invention comes from somewhere, from ingenuity, from curiosity. And once an invention happens, most of the time it goes away. But sometimes stars align and the inventor is able to hook up with a manufacturer or connect a few other dots and be able to overcome the fear and resistance of change and of new objects and show people this useful thing. And once they do that, the other thing that humans have gotten really good at is fast adapting. So once we see something useful, we can pick it up and use it very quickly. And that then creates opportunities for that wealth gaining that we were talking about, benefits, and the technology very often makes life easier, makes things go faster, and so we get growth because there's a new thing worth doing. And when we do the thing, it causes even more new things to happen. So we get this pattern of growth. But along with growth comes the disasters that are caused by that new thing because it doesn't have the right safety guard on it yet. Nobody's thought through what could happen if yet. And so disasters happen. And as those disasters accumulate and get worse, people start putting up signs and holding them and marching around and saying, that's not good. But then you get a dilemma. Because there's a thing which we all agree is super good. People are making money off it, and it's doing bad things. And so what are you going to do about it? Well, mostly nothing for quite some time, because the harm being done is still acceptable to everybody who interacts with it. It's regrettable when the bad things happen, but what are you going to do? Now, you will get the governance, the politicians, the councils, calling for some kind of change. But who's going to make a change? Well, what we see is that at some point, somebody who knows the system very well, knows the harms that are being caused, is triggered to think about it. And thinking is the juice behind any kind of change. So you trigger the right person into thinking about, I need to figure out what is going on, and then I need to see what can be done about it. And it's the same way that invention happens. Very seldom, very few people. Now, the more people in your society you pay to look at that, to think about it, to be curious, to have the ability and the time to dig into what's going on, get data, the better chances you have of correcting any of these systems. So then you have research that reveals the patterns that lead to the failures, and in doing that research, you create a new discipline. All right, that discipline then has the gravitas to recommend to government based on the factual nature and the applicability of the remedy. They can recommend to government what the actual action is that needs to take place. And once that happens, then you have regulation, you have standards, training, compliance, and that compliance drives down the bad thing. All right, so this is the pattern we see, and the example that I put below is maritime. Commercial maritime activity. Having a big ship made of steel driven by coal, that was great, except they blew up a lot. And then you got this pattern happened, and the field of mechanical engineering evolved out of that, and you got the ASME, American Society for Mechanical Engineers, boiler standard, and the explosions dropped off. All right, well, I put the Titanic up there in 1911 because that's a different kind of disaster problem. You'll all know that there weren't enough lifeboats on the ship, only about enough for a third of the people. You know that the crew had never practiced lowering the lifeboats. You know that the crew didn't know where any life preservers were kept. So they put the crew on and they took off, and they never did any training or drills or practices. And after the Titanic, that was one of the first sets of standards, that there's, yes, everybody has to know how to get everybody off and to have a plan. Because remember, they reckon about, 25% of the people who died didn't, it was a mistake. They didn't have the process of evacuation, and nobody knew what was going on, and the captain was making crazy orders, and yeah. So we have standard ways of doing things, practice, have the right number of equipment, know where it is, etc. Now, it turns out University of Hull was started after that accident in this area of getting this right. And so you start to get the discipline of maritime safety. Then Lloyd's Register, which is all about the money and the safety, so money and safety going together, plays its part. And now we have the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, really doing that compliance work. So we just keep seeing these patterns, those patterns of transition. One of the big things is development of the discipline, which is the role that Harriet Watt is playing in this, saying, look, there has to be a discipline of transition engineering, so hands up, we'll be the one. We'll be where it starts. Of course, there's maritime safety at other universities now, too. One isn't enough. So here's what transition engineering is. The work of transition engineering, you start with examining what's going on. So what is happening, and what's going on is business as usual. And this we call door number one. So this is the door that's already open. This is what we're already doing. We know what's on the other side, and we're going to keep doing it. The cards are on the table, the benefits are known, and we're off. Now, looking forward, what is the ways that we have to look at that? Door number two is what you see in your plans, in your scenarios, what you think you're going to do next, right? And so that is usually, you think of scenarios as at least 4 things. There's a range of scenarios. There's different things. And they're more about trying to think about what could happen than about what you're going to do. So that is the next thing we study, is what are the ideas for that. And where system transitions sit is where the system changes to a new way of operation. So those, as far as we can tell, have never been one of the scenarios. They've been a surprise. They've been something unexpected, something that you just wouldn't have seen. So they're a surprise. Now, if we can get ourselves to actually look ahead and see those things, we can bring that information back and start designing the transition mechanisms. We can design the things that exist in that other place where things, where the risks are mitigated and dangers are managed. So that's where the postcards from the future come in, is in doing the work of discovering those system transitions and making them real. All right, so transition engineering at this time. There is a professional organization. There's our lab here. There's the program at Harriet Watt that is being built. There's the foundations of the field. And with that QR code, you can visit the GATE website and find our MSc course that is available globally to anybody. It is transdisciplinary, so engineers can learn how to do this, but it's best if you have transdisciplinary teams working on it, because it's whole system transition. At the ICNZ, what is the ICNZ? Well, it is a partnership with a unique service model of working directly on changing what probably nobody knows how to change or wants to change. So finding those transitions, it is pretty hard work, really. But it's a partnership with Community Energy Scotland, Aquaterra, EMEC, and the Islands Councils, funded directly by government. We've got, I think, four more years of that funding, and looking to build a model that is self-funding and self-perpetuating. Now, the lab that we have been doing since February is on housing. All right, I gave a presentation earlier today where the person who invited me to talk to Shell, the engineers at Shell, said, you know, I thought that transition engineering was about renewable energy. Sure, what's it not about? That's the question. But it's about change. So what do we need to change about our housing? Is there anything wrong with our housing? Is there something that's causing harm? Well, there's a word, housing crisis, that's being used a lot. And the council's been studying what to do about housing. And if you've tried to get a house, you know there's challenges. If you already have a house and you're happy, then for you it's working. But if you're trying to hire somebody and trying to get them into Orkney, you know what the problem is. So if you can't have the ability to house workers and others who need to be in your community, then you have a social challenge and economic challenge. So we set up the transition lab for housing, and here's where we're at. It started in February, running with our MSc students who are in the lab class. We scheduled a meeting with the Orkney Island Council, and we have since set up what we call stakeholder clinics, and that is open to anyone who wants to have a 30-minute chat with us. We are hunting down and finding who we think are key stakeholders to do this clinic, but we want to have anybody who wants to come into the clinic come in. It's kind of like, you know, pixels, where there's lots of dots, and you can kind of maybe see the picture with a few dots, but the more dots you fill in, the more clear the picture becomes. So that's sort of the way we think about getting the picture of what's going on. We then worked through what we call the invention stage, where we look for that door number 3, we look to see what's there, and then we've had the students have turned in their lab reports on that 5th of May, so Friday. Monday? Okay, Monday. And so we're looking through those, and we do have the in-lab results, but we'll see how they went, and those are called path break concepts. Those, you know, what would happen that would cause a change in that system to get it to a good place. And best case scenario, which we did have 4 students last year took this up. They took that concept that they came up with and did their dissertation on that. So then they went from concept development to prototype development. So fleshing that out, doing some economics, doing some design and some numbers, testing out the idea. And so that's where we're going next. And we do have some PhD students working on this. So here's our transition lab for the housing crisis. We have funding provided by Heriot-Watt University scholarships and by ICNZ. From ICNZ funding, we have a postdoc, our coordinator, our assistant, and PhD students. And we have a grant from Olson Renewables to work on the problem of housing. And I've given you the names there of the PhD students, and Paolo and Leandro is here, who's also working on the housing project. And then our transition lab is in the basement, and we're working with the Orkney Island Council. And then there's me and the MSc students and all of you and the stakeholders, and so we're away. We've got everything we need. So what is the challenge that needs addressing? That's what we've got to think about. Are we just missing an obvious solution or something like that, or is there a real challenge? Well, the thing that needs addressing is that there's an unthinkable possibility. Those 2 words that don't usually go together, right? So the unthinkable possibility is that we could get past the housing crisis. We could figure it out. If we didn't have a housing crisis, what would it be like? It would be like people could find a house, an affordable house that suits their needs in the place where they need to be to do their work. Would that be okay? That's what people can't do right now. So it feels almost impossible that we could have that good thing, but that's where we're going. That's our mission. So to actually have the service we need by pivoting a business model. Now, I've put business model in there, and you'll see why. Why does this challenge need to be addressed? Because, frankly, there is no other way it's going to be addressed. Nobody's going to come in and solve our problem. This is the thing that humanity needs to learn how to do. Sort itself out. We need to sort ourselves out when we have problems. You know, the council doesn't have the solutions. Sorry, they're trying, but they don't. So there's no other way to actually do it. And why is our transition engineering lab the best idea to address this challenge? Well, the systems engineering approach is designed to actually explore unthinkable opportunities. And especially to look at what's future safe. So there's things about going in the way we're going that we know are going to hurt people, that are going to have lasting negative impact, and so we need to go to a place where that is not happening anymore. All right, so we've had stakeholder clinic meetings. We just are learning perspectives, and starting next week, no, continuing on from February. They're about 35 minutes long. They're small group, one-to-one, and we can do them by team. So that's continuing. And then we've had our first Wicked Problem Workshop, and those are going to continue. A Wicked Problem Workshop is where we dig into what is going on and have that clear-eyed look at it. So this is the results of the first Wicked Problem Workshop. So what we're looking for in getting, doing this work of investigating a wicked problem in a particular way, according to an investigation method, is that we're looking for a way to express the problem that isn't that sort of housing crisis. We want to know, what is it really that's the problem? And so with the help of stakeholders, this is the definition we've got from the first one. Like I said, it's 1 point. We keep going, and we'll see how it all fleshes out. Getting into Orkney, getting into an affordable, healthy home in the place where Orkney needs you to be. Right? So don't forget that. So in this piece, we weren't looking at trying to meet the needs of holiday homemakers or people who don't actually need to be here. Right? Start with the people who need to be here, sort that problem out, and then see where we go from there. So the underlying issue here is that the property enterprise is both the same as the rest of the world. It's normal. The property enterprise, the way you make money off the good thing of being able to build houses, sell them again, get a mortgage, sell them, get a mortgage, sell, yeah, that thing, the property enterprise. It's the same, it's normal, it's what we think it is, but it's also unique to Orkney. And the purpose of the property enterprise, why it exists, is not to make sure that we all can get a house in the place we need to be. That is not why it exists. Am I right? It does not exist to make sure that our homes are fit for purpose, or keep us well, or use green energy. That's not what the property enterprise does. It does what it does, which is capitalize a exchange, a interaction between people, and make money on that. All right. So Orkney requires getting to know neighbors. That is the way the local Orkney process works. It requires that you get to know somebody. It requires that you come here. But there aren't any temporary places for people to come except for tourists. So it's hard to come in and find your place where you need to be. So that's sort of what we're going to work on then. So from that point of view, let's learn from history. And what we learned from history, looking at the turn of last century, was that there was no property enterprise. That's not how it was. You had long hold personal property. So if you we looked at the ownership registers, and there were people who owned a lot of property that they then rented out to people. What we also found was that the rent was dependent on your ability to pay. Probably the quality of your accommodation also was, but it seems like it was in somebody's interest to actually house people, to get them into something. And what's interesting is, I've shown a picture here from 1904, where there were many more people here then than today. They were working, and you can still see their accommodation down the road. So what we found by looking at history, the way the system works, is that employers had a hand in accommodating the workers they needed in the place where they needed to be. Now, that said, an awful lot of people lived in their own premises of work, right? If there was a bakery, then above or behind was where the family lived. So fishermen and farmers, you have that same thing, the marrying up of the work and the home. So that was a interesting thing, which I don't think you would see now. That's not, except for farming. It's just not, it's not a thing that's connected anymore. All right, so now we look at what's going on now and what are the pressures for change. What are the scenarios going forward? What are we doing? And the one thing that we seem to talk about the most is renewable energy. Will renewable energy solve the housing crisis? When the housing crisis is solved, will there be renewable energy? Sure. But we need to figure out the other thing that we need to do besides renewable energy. So keep going with the renewable energy, but now what else to actually solve the housing crisis? And right now, the scenario that seems to be the most prominent is we'll increase supply. Right? We'll build more houses. That's what we'll do. But there's no idea of changing the property enterprise. So since we found that the property enterprise itself doesn't really care whether people are housed the way they're supposed to be, then I'm not sure that more houses would actually solve the problem. But how would we know? We actually need data. This is a thing we don't have. We don't, and I don't think anybody else has either. And that's profoundly interesting that in this day and age, there's digital stuff, that there are digital shadows of all this stuff, but we don't have an eye on it. It's hiding in the shadows. So there's a lot of ideas too. There's things that people bring up, and we really need to understand and test out what are the impacts of those. And that's tourism, short-term let, second homes, empty homes, old homes. That's all stuff that there really isn't data for. There's feeling about, but there's not data. So we need new ways of understanding what's going on. And by data, I don't think I mean just data. I think I mean ways to understand. So door number 3, this is where we want to go next, the unthinkable opportunities. We want to explore 2125. So catch the bus. See, if he could find a house in Stromness, he wouldn't have to pay essentially a second rent in order to drive back and forth between Stromness and Kirkwall. All right, so we're going to explore 2125. All right, anybody have a problem with that? Going 100 years into the future. We won't be there, so that's safe. We won't run into ourselves and scare ourselves. So 100 years in the future, that's roughly 4 generations. So somebody we do know will be there. So somebody we'll know in our lifetime will be there in 100 years. So we have a direct connection. We are going to research the scale of the opportunity in 2125 where the housing crisis no longer exists. There's no longer a housing crisis there. So what is going on? What is good? What's the value in not having the housing crisis? Is there a value in not having the housing crisis? You'd think, but we want to quantify it. We want to study it. So we want to have these expert transition labs, which you guys can contribute to, of course. And we want to think about how to use the tools we have of data and modeling and gaming out scenarios and unknowns to look at 100 years from now. Now, the only way to do that is to cut off our connection with what we think we're going to do next. Right? If we're going to path break and go to a place where we are not hanging on to that old system that is creating and worsening the housing crisis, then we have to break from it. So if the future where the housing, transport, and energy are impoverishing the community is not permitted, then what? If you can't have energy poverty, housing poverty, transport poverty, then what? Well, that's a good question. You have to invent a whole new system because our system does that. So we have to put away our system. So the system has to be, if you're going to invent it, it has to be operationally stable and it has to have manageable risks. So it can't be crazy. It can't have high risk. It has to be generating needs-meeting values for society and customers. It has to be doing good things. It has to be generating returns for investors. And it has to be shaping policy. All right, so that's where we're going. So if you're ready, we'll go to Stromness 2120. We lost our one. Here's the idea. If we went to Stromness in 2125, how much different would it look from 2025? So we could sail out into the ocean until we could just barely see Stromness, and then we could sail back in 100 years, and what would be different? The ferry wouldn't be belching diesel smoke. I should have said we're path breaking to a future where we didn't let the bad things happen. So we didn't let that bad thing happen either. So that's why there's no diesel fumes. There's also no cars running around. And we see lots of lovely sailing ships, and there's people, and it looks an awful lot like it does now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go explore Stromness 2125, and we're going to see what we learn, and then we're going to send a postcard. So that's a very small snippet of observation of something that you observed in Stromness 2125 that you want somebody now to know about, because knowing that now could lead to that important thing happening. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is so we're in 2125 now. Well, we're 2125. And we look up the hill, and sure enough, it doesn't look that much different than it does in 2025. Is Heriot-Watt University Transition Lab still here in 100 years? Do you know any 100-year-old buildings? Oh, there's some right up the hill. So it's conceivable that a building well maintained and with a purpose to exist would still be here in 100 years. All right, so we start there. And we go down the road, down Victoria Street. How about these old sandstone buildings? Are they still there in 100 years? All right, but what we do notice is that those grotty, rotty wood windows, those aren't there anymore. There's nice, stable windows. It looks like they look pretty nice inside. They look toasty. Talk to a few locals, and they say, yeah, that was a long time ago. We got all the houses sorted out. So yeah, that's fine. And that's one of those things Sandy talked about, that we do know how to do that. We're just stopping ourselves from doing it. So in 100 years, if you walk down the street of Stromness and the rotting doors and the rotting windowsills and the streaky mold and the flaking plaster, if that's all gone and the place is all tidy and the moisture's kept out and we have thermal windows everywhere, even if they aren't the exact sash windows from 2025, is it okay? Yeah, it is. It's very nice. All right, so we're starting to inform little decisions that might be made now that get us over ourselves and get us over the things that are stopping us from doing what obviously we need to do, and move on. And what you'll find is that uber adaptability that people have, that humans have, living through the earthquakes of Christchurch, where 15,000 houses were knocked down in a minute and a half, and then so many other houses had to be cleared. They had to be demolished and moved out. I can attest to that the house that I rode my bicycle by for 12 years, I notice, oh, that's gone, and I can't remember what it was. Right? We move on so fast. So something happens between now and then that people find a way to move on. Preserve the heritage, preserve what's good, and make it better. Not commit to living in ruins. All right? So that's a thing we might notice. Okay, now we keep walking down the street and we see, okay, nice town, again, no cars. And we ask people, what if we needed to move here? We're coming here for work. What would we do? And they said, well, you go down to the placemaker up the tune. Go up the tune to the placemaker shop. Go there. Okay, you mean a estate agent? No, that's from like 100 years ago. No, the placemaker, go there. Okay, so we go down to the placemaker, and you can see it, and we go in, and we explain, okay, we're here with Heriot-Watt University, we're coming here for work, what do we do? And they said, oh, well, we'll have you in the system then. What system? Well, you're coming for work, so your employer will have put you into the system. Oh, maybe not. We're surprised. Well, that's all right. We can get you in. You know, who's your employer? We'll get you onto that roster. And they have the information about where we need to be. So we're working at Heriot-Watt, so we need to be in Stromness. And can you cycle? Do you cycle? Yes. Do you have an electric cycle? Yes. Okay, so here's where you can be. And what about yourself? No, can't cycle. Never cycled a day in my life. I walk, but I can run. Okay, so here's where you can be. And then all of the houses, but my boys come a couple times a year. I have people that come to visit me. Nope, just me. Okay, well, here are the houses that suit you. And here's the forward map of when those are coming available, and some that if they knew somebody wanted it, they're ready to downsize, they're ready to move to a different place, and so we match you up. We'll get you into the system. And to do that, we know you need to come now, so we have a eco-village over near the university. It's under trees, it's lovely. The houses, the places are quite small, they're cabins, but you just get in there and they'll take care of you till we find your place. So we'll have some, 4 or 5 places for you to look at in the next couple of months. Well, that didn't seem stressful. Seemed kind of civilized. And then they also put us in touch with the people who we have things in common with. You say you like to do baking. Well, there is a baking club that meets on Tuesdays. So we'll make an introduction and make sure you get in there. So this placemaker is more than real estate. And in fact, it isn't really real estate at all, because the way that it works seems to be that everybody has some sort of a share or a stake in the community benefit. So it's not like a commune or a kibbutz or something, but the value of the housing seems to be something that your piece, you keep it up, you improve it, you have done that, and there's a record of that. So that's the other thing we see there, is the benefit, because think about it, if you fix up your house right now, do that thing of getting the windows done and all that, you pay for it, and for the next 60 years, everybody benefits. What kind of system is that? If you could track those benefits and track where the maintenance is needed and track what needs doing, then you could think of whole new ways of getting that done. And that's what they've got. They've got that this really cool new information system. And it looks like they call it, the thing they want us to fill out, which we were supposed to fill out before with our employer and send it in, is our household roots. What type of house do we need? Of course, from our employer, they know the income that we have and how many people we're supporting, and then the types of activities that we need to engage in. The things we like to do, the things we must do. We have a dog, so we have to walk the dog. And that becomes this sort of, think of the roots of a tree. And if you take that tree and you put it over here where there's a big rock, well, it'll put its roots around the rock. If you put it over here, it'll go deep into a crack. And so you can form your roots depending on where you go. And so they have a system that kind of helps to find the best places to plant you and your household. And that's what you're looking at. Think of that, a service that actually tries to get you rooted into the community you're in, that you need to be in. That's a little bit different than the property enterprise. Okay, which is now long gone there. So this model for how to pivot, to engineer and build the transitions, it looks like we definitely need information systems around household needs. And that's not a thing that you see when the solution that you think is the only solution is to juice up the property enterprise by getting more houses built. Maybe we need to focus on household needs and see where that gets us. So that's where we're starting with the research, is that as a transition mechanism to drive the growth at scale by looking at the whole system. And here you'll see I've also put goods movement in it. We can't live in a place if we can't get nutrients in and can't get our wastes away. So we are connected to other places besides just the place we're in. And in our system right now, that's all fossil fueled. So that's a whole other thing that needs to transition. And I hope Kedji's online, who's our other PhD student who's working on that, and has finally, in June, found a place to live in Kirkwall. Even though, so she's been a remote PhD student for quite some time. So we're finally going to get her into Orkney. Right, so that's what she's going to work on, is building that mechanism of a way to create the household roots and be able to take that profile of who you are and what you need and hand it over to where that need can be met. That isn't that different from our medical profiles. Somewhere in the Skerryvore or the Balfour, they have the information about what you need and they take care of you. That's a system meant to do that. Why would housing be different? Right. So we've been to 2125. We did this exercise with the students. And we have a postcard to John McGlynn of Orick. An observation that John McGlynn needs to know. That the Orick Eco Village that you will build in 2026 is still thriving and providing the temporary accommodation for people shifting house or moving into Orkney. The Eco Village is a real feature of Stromness and a real asset for the community. The well-constructed cabins are still lovely, so don't rush. Don't rush, but hurry. We need the ability to house people who need to be here temporarily, and not at the rates of the Airbnb, and not having to move every 2 weeks. That's not the way to welcome people to your community. So we build the welcome, and it becomes a fixture of the community. Do you know what I mean by that? This plot of land over here. Have you ever been to a caravan park where they have those sort of cabins on wheels? Okay, you need a sewer line, a water line, and electricity, and wheel them down there and park them, and think about the design of an eco-village. So there's common spaces, there's a common laundry. These little cabins, they are quite small, but you're not going to live in it forever, just till you find a place. And of course, if they're available, they could be rented out to tourists to help return on the investment. So that's one of the things we saw there. And then a postcard to Richard Williams, president of Heriot Walt. So the STEPS Transition Lab project to build the household roots demo. So demo is a short for data exchange, modelizing, and observatory. That's that thing that they were using to find our place, has become legendary. It's like James Watt's steam engine. The world's cities would never have been able to transition from cars to people so quickly without the steps. I thought you would like to know. So that's the sort of thing that we see looking back. All right, so thank you for thinking along, and I think that's time for discussion then.
This is working.
Blue button.
Blue button.
All right.
Next process it.
Tech problems. All right, are there any online questions?
There we go.
No, it's all
Okay,
silent.
thanks. So, yeah, thanks, Susan. So we'll just throw open for questions. I was the reason I put my mic on is I wanted to dive in first question and give folks a little chance to think. But I wanted to take you back to the slide you put up, the Titanic at one end, or it was almost the Titanic at one end, and International Maritime Organization at the other end. And you said there's this pattern we see of kind of overshoot. I think I've heard you mention it previously. I was in Indonesia last year, and there is hardly a scrap of pristine mangrove left because it's all been ripped up to create prawn farms, which have all gone bankrupt because they ended up polluting the environment that they were using. And I mean, I actually, without being too controversial, fear that we're heading in the same direction this side with certain aquaculture industries locally. But why don't we learn? Why does that overshoot seem to happen time and time again? Is it something wrong with the feedback or what?
Okay, the boom and bust are us, right? Boom and bust is a thing that we're very good at. And if the folks over there in Scarborough did a bit of boom and bust, it probably wouldn't destroy something forever. And in fact, changing the way the environment works in this place for a while, then move to another place, when you don't have that technology benefit that lets you keep growing exponentially instead of tipping over, then you can wipe out the whole thing when you finally tip over. And you're right, we don't have the way to look forward and see that. What we have the science. One thing that I studied a lot was the North Atlantic cod fishery that, of course, was extincted. And it was 17 years before the peak and the crash that the scientists were explaining to policymakers why they had to limit the catch. And then there was that discussion about, you say there's uncertainty, and that whole play again of, sure, but what about the poor fishermen? Are you saying they just have to stop fishing? And that's that wicked problem that we were talking about, that there's a good thing that's also a bad thing. Letting it play out to disaster, maybe the next time Indonesia starts setting up something, but probably not. What we are missing is the transition engineering, that purposeful looking at something, which we've got computers now, we can actually do the prediction and just have, you do need a process though. That's why we call the system transition engineering processes. It's the processes of looking at the hazards, the harms, worst cases, and then working around to, well, what would be a really good way to have this prawn industry? You know, how do we balance it? So it's about balance. And I think we just don't have the steps for balance yet. So we should build them.
Yeah.
So, it's almost counterfactual or almost detrimental when we keep looking at the cases of failure, because it convinces us that that's just what's going to happen. So always, if you look at those cases, work back and just ask, okay, at what point would somebody have done what? And in the book here, you'll see I did that with the North Atlantic cod fishery. If transition engineering existed in 1960, how would we still be eating North Atlantic cod? And it is kind of a funny thing to think through, because what you would have had is somebody would have been triggered by the scientific information that we were heading for wiping out that cod fishery. Somebody would have looked at the forward orders for fishing in the fishing fleet, which, don't forget, the order for the biggest cod boat came in the year the fishery collapsed. That future blind thing is true, right? So stranded assets, lost investments, it wasn't good for anybody. So somebody upstream who was in the business of making the fishing equipment heard what the scientists were saying and said, look, our long-term business model has to shift from throwing bigger, faster, more efficient, more gobbly boats at these people. If we want to be here in 25 years providing equipment to the cod fishery, we have to protect the cod fishery. Therefore, we will not make boats that can completely wipe out the entire species. And we will, like the bottom trawler, same thing. Change the equipment, change how it's done on purpose to save your own industry. And that's how in the rewriting the ending story, how we see how applying transition engineering could have done that. So,
Okay.
Next time.
Thank you. Okay, let's go here first. Sorry, and then.
Thank you. It was a combination of seeing Stromness and you talking about the windows made me think a postcard from 100 years would be to the council to tell them to stop preventing people from putting in double glazing and plastic windows, all these things that you were saying would be a really good idea, which we know would make our homes more energy efficient, but which we are not allowed to do. Absolutely. I mean, it's just crazy. It's not that, you can make things that look good. It's not that you have to have white plastic. But we don't allow those homes to be made good for the next 100 years now. And we know how to do it, but we're not doing it.
So if we were going to write a postcard on that, I want to duplicate this. Oh, that's all right. I'll duplicate it. I'll rewrite it. So it's to somebody at the council. Not council?
Yeah, the planning department.
OIC planning.
It's not on the screen.
Oh, I think I'm not in control of that.
There we go. You're up there now.
OIC planning. All right. This is a postcard from 2125. We said we were in 2125. And the thing we want them to know capital S. They won't believe us if we don't capitalize. Something like that. You can write it for yourself.
It
if
would
you
be a
want, but I'll try.
start.
All right, who should we sign it?
The residents of Stromness.
It just struck me there that we talked about overshoot, and a moment or two ago, it's almost like policy overshoot. And there's, with the conservation of the buildings, there's no feedback getting to the people that need it. And I speak personally, I've suffered from this problem myself, in my own home. Yeah, It's interesting. Assume there's a question.
What are you going to lose if we actually future-proof our houses? It's not risk.
Thank you for your presentation. I think it's very interesting, and for the commentary as well, because the more I think about it, every time I listen to you, I learn something new, and a new thing comes to my mind. And if you go to slide number 23, where you're trying to show this, exactly. The more I think about this, I think it's a kind of a planning disaster or a strategy disaster. So, because how are decisions made? It's a decision-making issue, yeah? So what you're trying to say is, are we looking at things top-down or bottom-up? So bottom-up, we would make strategy in a different way, So it just reminds me of Henry Mintzberg's 11 different ways of planning, But looking at this now, supposing it is completely bottom-up and we engineer and build this nice green bubble, my question then would be, is this manageable? And who's going to manage this? Yeah, is this an optimization problem, or is this a wicked problem? How is the planner going to look at this? So if this is going to develop organically 100 years from now.
Right. What is emergent planning? Right. So the question, we do this exercise of leaping to 100 years from now, where it's all played out great, and the wicked problem that we left behind is way in the dust. People barely remember it anymore. In hindsight, they've created their own heroes and their own stories about that big change. But now, how are they keeping it from blowing up again? Right? Because if we're chronic boomers and busters, then how are we controlling ourselves? And I have a cheeky answer. Do you want the cheeky answer to that? Women are half the decision making. Is that cheeky? Okay, here's my logic for that. This time of industrialization has been predominantly male, no question about that.
But in the Titanic, there was a gender problem there. The women were allowed to go first.
Well, they were made to go first.
Yeah. So just thinking about that, there was a inequality back there. So.
Well, it was a cultural norm for women and children to go first, but it was a planning problem in how to organize that exit, because, of course, that meant separating men from their families, and that really clogged the system and got a lot of the boats empty or launched half full, because women wouldn't go if their husbands couldn't go. So it was just a disaster management issue. But, of course, there was no way to make it much better because there weren't enough boats, and nobody knew where the life vests were. So, yeah, it was a disaster, a multi-disaster. So the reason I say that in the next 100 years we're going to have the balancing effect of the female perspective is because if I look at my anthropology, I see that you have to have both the let's knock it down, let's go build it, let's push on each other with a bar in the middle. Who does this, right? We got to have that go get 'em do stuff part of society. And then we got to have the don't you dare touch the larder. We've got 5 months to go before spring. We are not going to party and eat all the food right now, right? Somebody has to be in charge of making sure we store everything we've got, be careful about how we use it, double think that, hang on a minute, all right? So whoever that voice is, yeah, it's a bit predominantly female. So we're going to get balance of, oh, that's a good idea, let's go do that. Okay, but let's think through it. Let's look at it. Let's see what if it makes sense. Okay, it makes sense to do it like this much instead of this much, okay? All right, we'll do that and then we'll see how it goes, right? So this back and forth, yin and yang, balance. That's what we're going to be able to do, and that's what they're doing in 100 years from now. They are still crazy, they're still playing the ba, but they're, you know, they're not letting things take off. They're and I wouldn't say planning either. I don't think planning is the right word when you're going to build a building. You definitely need a plan to order the right stuff, to get things in the right place, right? You need a plan. But when you're talking about things like, you know, an enterprise making decisions about overshooting, that's not exactly planning. It's restraint. It's observation. It's dynamic management. So yeah, it is a good question though. How are they not blowing up again? Blowing up the next thing.
Okay. Anybody else feel up for a question? I'm just going to ask one more quick question because I'm staring at that diagram, and we've got postcards from the future where we want to be. We've got a worry and blue malign where we might end up if we don't do anything. And this sort of idea that if we know where we want to get to, then we can, you know, get onto that pink, I'm a bit colourblind, I'm afraid.
We can start building it.
Yeah, got to start building it. I suppose one of the issues I have in my mind about making this difficult change is if you have a kind of global system, global economy, or national at least, how can you do that in an incremental way? How can you do that in Orkney, for example, or in any other one location, when that one location, Orkney, is embedded in a bigger system that's just chugging along, doing same old, same old? So, you know, it's that kind of, you know, how do we do this incrementally, or does it need to be some sort of big bang moment when, you know, the whole country starts doing things differently? Do you get my question?
Well, that is the way that things evolve, is that, according to the book I read about inventions, it doesn't appear that anything's ever been invented in two places, in different places. You know, there's always a through line that says, okay, there were many people working on the same thing, and then you'll see it. But you can always trace back to the core invention. Actually, doesn't happen very many. It happens once. So you take advantage of it. So that's what we're trying to create, is the primordial soup of that kernel of a new idea that then we can work on and we can see. Because like I said, once you can see it, then it can move very fast. And so it is a lab environment, but it's a real lab environment because we're working on the real problems. And in the context of what kind of system, if it existed here, could exist everywhere else too. And then build the discipline to build it, operate it, manage it, regulate it, and run it.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Just one little thing.
Thank you, Susan. Last chance. Yes, good question.
Do you think this is engineering, Susan, or is it politics?
Is it engineering or is it politics? Here's a funny thing that I found from looking at these historical patterns, is that in hindsight, it looks like politics, because that's the closest thing to us. What we don't see is that politics from here, from here, what we see is politics going, yay, this is great, right? New thing, banners, party. And from here going, well, that seems good, yeah? And from here going, oh, so this is hand-wringing I'm doing, right? This isn't good, somebody sort this out. And then from here, usually it's 2 syllables at this point. net zero. Hydrogen economy, right? So you just sort of cast about for something, because we can't really get in there, right? And meanwhile, somebody's doing something. Somebody somewhere is doing something. And there's always, and this is a thing that I think, if you think about something really big and humongous like climate change, back in the 80s, there were hundreds of thousands of people like me who were quite aware of climate change and who were thinking, I'm going to work on something to fix that, right? I'm going to go into renewable energy and energy efficiency to fix that. And then we don't have a discipline. That thing never happened of there being a place to research and a discipline that would take what we're learning, what we're working on, what we're creating, and turn it into the way we do things. That's the only, you don't get to do the dumb thing anymore, right? So that's that transition. And the job, I think, would be the fastest route to this big change for this big problem is to find all those people and converge. Because I've met people like me in all different fields, each pulling their own way, thinking they're the only one doing anything. And it's because we've never had a place to come together. So that's the other thing I'm hoping transition engineering can do. It can provide the home. Even though we use the word engineering, that's why we're using steps, because it's a whole system. You do have to have the engineering. You can't leave that out. That's what's actually needs to actually happen, is engineering the changes in engineered systems. But it's through these processes which involve the management, the policy, the regulation, learning, certification, etc. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Okay, thanks. There was half a hand went up, but it's not come up. Okay, thank you very much,
Sure.
Susan. Thank you, who's ever out there online.
And everyone can join the Global Association for Transition Engineering. It is the first interdisciplinary professional organization that also has a support structure. So if you think that people need to get together to do this work, you can support that organization to help people do it. So I don't know if anybody a professional engineer? Right. So professional engineering, it has that membership and professional engineering and chartered engineer. It has that layer, but then it has associate layers and affiliate layers that let you, you know how you can join, you can become a Greenpeace supporter and support their work. You can support a group, the lifeboat people, and not have to actually go out in the ocean. That kind of a, you really hope the lifeboat people keep going and do what they're doing, but yeah, you're not actually going to get in the lifeboat and go paddling.
You're interested, join up. So everybody, thanks, Susan, in the usual way. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.